Welcome to the explainer. Okay, think about a candle flame or a whirlpool. You can point right at them, so they've got to be things, right? But what if I told you they're made of absolutely nothing permanent at all? Today, we're going to explore this really wild idea that the world isn't made of things, but of patterns. So let's just dive right in with a question that, on the surface, seems kind of simple. What is the world really made of? I mean, the answer feels obvious, doesn't it? It's made of, stuff, things. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if we're not even asking the question in the right way? You see, most of us, without even thinking about it, see the world through what we're going to call the brick view. Basically, solid things exist first, and then, change happens to them. But what if reality is actually the other way around? What if change itself is the most fundamental thing, and what we call things are just stable patterns that pop up out of all that constant flux? Okay, let's just stick with that common sense picture for another minute. This idea that the world is basically a collection of solid objects, almost like a giant warehouse, just filled with stuff. This view gives us this really neat and tidy hierarchy, right? Big things are made of smaller things, which are made of even smaller things, all the way down to the most basic little particles. In this picture, the bricks are what's real, and what they do is secondary. But some really simple, everyday examples start to poke some serious holes in this idea. So that's the standard picture. But this is where it starts to get really interesting. Let's take a look at a few things we see all the time that just don't fit very well into that warehouse of stuff model. For starters, just think about a simple candle flame. It holds this consistent, recognizable shape. We can point to it and we call it a thing. It seems pretty solid in our perception, but if we zoom in, the story gets a whole lot weirder. A flame isn't a static object. It's a place of constant throughput. Fuel and air are always being pulled in, they react, and then hot gases and light are always shooting out. The actual molecules, the literal stuff that makes up the flame in any given second, are completely different from the molecules that were there just a second ago. They're all brand new. And that leaves us with a really interesting puzzle. If the material itself is never the same from one moment to the next, what are we actually pointing at? What is the flame if it's not made out of some fixed stuff? And this idea isn't just a one-off. It applies to other things too. For instance, think about a whirlpool when you drain the sink. It totally feels like a distinct object in the water, a thing you can clearly see and point to. But just like the flame, a whirlpool is a process of pure flow. You have water constantly spiraling in from the top and shooting out the bottom. The individual water molecules, they're just temporary visitors, just passing through on their way down the drain. So here we are again, back at that same fundamental question. If the water itself is always new, what in the world is the whirlpool? What is this shape that somehow persists, even when all the material is just rushing through it? Well, this brings us to a really crucial distinction. Are things like stable bricks just fixed stuff that sits around waiting for something to happen? Or are they maybe more like eddies? Shapes whose very existence is maintained by motion, by constant change. This little shift in perspective, from seeing a brick to seeing an eddy, it opens up a really powerful new way to define what a thing actually is. This leads us to a whole new definition. A thing isn't really a lump of matter. Instead, it's a stable pattern of activity. It's a way of going on that manages to sustain and renew itself even when the world around it is chaotic and messy. Let's just break that down really quick. First, it's a pattern. It's an organized flow, like the swirl of a whirlpool. It's stable, meaning it can handle a few bumps and knocks without just falling apart. Its very existence is change. A flame is its burning. It's constantly remaking itself, always pulling in new fuel or new water. And it survives under pressure, holding its shape in the real, imperfect world. And, this pattern view isn't just for flames and whirlpools. It scales up to pretty much everything. A traffic jam is a pattern that actually moves backward, even though all the cars in it are trying to move forward. A living organism, that's you, is an incredibly complex pattern of biochemical processes, constantly replacing its own cells. An economy? Just a huge, vast pattern of exchanges and flows. Okay, so this is way more than just a kind of cool way to reframe things. This new perspective actually solves some philosophical puzzles that have, and I'm not kidding, stumped people for thousands of years. Let's talk about that classic thought experiment, the ship of Theseus. The puzzle goes like this. If you have a ship and over many years you replace every single plank of wood one by one, when you're done, is it still the same ship? Now, if you're using the brick view, you're completely stuck. It's a paradox. If a thing's identity is all about having the same stuff, there's just no clear answer. But with the pattern view, the problem just dissolves. Identity isn't about the stuff, it's about the choreography, the design, the function, the history. So, is it the same ship? The answer is a clear and simple yes. Yeah, identity isn't about having the same atoms. It's about keeping the dance going. Does the ship have an unbroken history of being maintained? Does it still do its job? Does it maintain its design and purpose? If that whole pattern of organization and function and history is still there, then the thing is still there. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, sure, but patterns are just abstract ideas. The little particles are what's really real. But that's not quite right. Patterns are real in the most practical, meaningful sense of the word. We know patterns are real because we interact with them all the time. We try to steer an economy by changing interest rates. That's a pattern level change. Our best science makes predictions by modeling patterns, not by tracking every single atom. And a whirlpool can exist in water or in air or even in plasma. The material doesn't matter. The pattern is the real thing. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It completely flips our ordinary view of the world on its head. We don't start with a static reality full of stuff. We start with a universe of dynamic activity, of doings, where the stable things that we see are actually the exception, not the rule. So let's just end with a question to bring this all back home. If you, your body, your mind, your whole identity, are not just a fixed collection of atoms, but an incredibly complex, self-renewing pattern of activity, a dance that's been going on for decades, what dance exactly are you keeping?